won't touch anything.
Yep. Don't. I said no touch anything. Are you gonna be Willie Scott and be like, no, I'm not gonna help you?
Did you ever play the Lego Indiana Jones games?
No, I haven't. I have them digitally on like one of my PlayStations.
I highly recommend it. That was the first game where you could break glass, and you had to have Willie to do it because her scream could break the glass.
I believe that. She's the only one who had real pipes in any of these movies anyway for screaming.
Yeah, that's true. Karen Black was not as high pitched.
No.
Like she needed help, but she wasn't going to scream that loud for it.
Nope, Miss Capshaw did though.
Yes, she did. Which we'll get into all that, but Willie's probably my least favorite Jones girl.
Really?
If that's such a thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm a Miriam kind of guy. Always have been.
Okay.
But like I even like the crazy German lady more than Willie.
The Last Crusade girl I like a little bit more too.
Yeah. Elsa, was that her name? Something like that.
This is when I become a bad Indiana Jones fan. I don't remember her name. All I know is Marion from the first one, the third one, then Willie, and then whatever we saw. Nope, there wasn't a fourth one. That's right.
Yeah, the fourth one was Miriam again, which was a good ending to the Indiana Jones legacy. Like you didn't need the whole his son aspect to it. You didn't need much of anything else except for him and Miriam finally getting married. Like if they would have just cut like an hour and 45 minutes out of that last movie, it would have been just fine.
Yeah, if we were about like 20 minutes, yeah.
Like that's all anyone really wanted to see was Indy and Miriam finally get together.
You see, I went into that movie having like no expectations because I was pretty content with the first three movies. And so I kind of went in kind of like, whatever this is, whatever it is. The one thing is I was not expecting aliens. And that's what pushed it over the line for me. As far as like, I don't like this. I don't hate it. It's just one of those that's just I'm kind of wiped from my memory. I have no intention of ever rewatching it. Even though I have like I think I have one of the Blu-ray box sets that has all four of them in it, but I won't watch that. I'll do 1 through 3 and then I will check out Dial of Destiny when that comes out in a few months.
I will check it out. I don't know that I'm going to end up liking it more than Crystal Skull. And I didn't really like Crystal Skull to begin with. I mean, it's like you said, it's one of those situations where you go in wanting to like it, and you know in the back of your head you're supposed to, but at the same time you understand you just watched 2 hours of Shia LaBeouf thinking he's going to become the next Indiana Jones, and it just wasn't that good at all. And then yeah, Aliens, like Spielberg kind of slapped himself in the face there, like reinforcing his own stereotypes. It just didn't need to be. The whole psychic thing and UFOs, that worked because that was the whole shtick for the Russians and us in the 1950s was the arms race and psychic interference and things like that and mind control. They tried doing all sorts of shit with like even dolphins in the 50s and 60s. And so they just barely scratched the surface of that in Indiana Jones. And the best thing we came out of that was him surviving a nuclear blast in a fucking lead-lined refrigerator.
Oh, God.
And I think the best part of that movie is it's going to bring us all the way back to the beginning, and it's going to make this redheaded stepchild an even better of a film that actually fits into what we now refer to as the Indiana Jones trilogy. Because without that fourth movie, it was just 1 and 3 were the good ones, and now we've got Temple of Doom being just fine. It's that middle bowl of porridge, just fine after the Crystal Skull.
I must be one of the rare exceptions where I felt like I loved like all three of them. Clearly, the first one is the best. I mean, just about everybody agrees with that. It's what comes thereafter. Some people like 3, they don't like part 2. Some people like part 2, but they don't like part 3. But they don't like part 2 and 3, but 4 was fine. And for the rest of us, we just ignore part 4 for the most part.
Well, you're right about nothing beats the first movie. And they knew that going into this picture. Like they tried doing
Yeah,
everything bigger. Oh, hey, it's time for us to start.
and different.
they they started this movie, they wanted it to be bigger on every scale. Like it was going to be an improvement from the first picture. But they kept going and saying, you can't be better than the first movie. How do we get around that? So they came up with the idea of the prequel. This is the first movie, and Raiders come second. So no matter
Right.
what they were going to do, they were going to insist this is the first movie. It'll be no better than this. And it wasn't exactly that. It
No,
was
they
fun.
did try and replicate the charm and score the lightning in a bottle a second time. I I understand what everybody's viewpoint is on that, but I'm of the opinion never watch this one first. Even though
No.
it's definitely timeline wise first, I'll never watch these chronologically. I will always watch Raiders first, then watch this. It feels like it's, if you watch it in that context, like it feels like it's a better movie. If you actually watch this as it's intended to be chronologically, you go from this into the second one, you're like, boy, that second one just absolutely smoked that fucking movie. And then what are we doing here? But they definitely went for a completely different kind of a story where he's escaping from China and he gets crash landed in whitewater rafting into India. And then he's there with Short Round, obligatory kid insertion into a movie. Welcome to the 80s and the 90s. And then you got
Absolutely.
Willie Scott, uh, a girl that basically serves no purpose to the story. Let's be honest here. And you go from the flip of the first one where Miriam is clearly integral to the part and actually is a strong character and actually does what she needs to do. No offense to Kate Capshaw, this is just what they did with your character in this one. And and so we went with a completely different kind of story, different location. So we got beautiful visuals, we had great set pieces. I mean, honestly, the Malaram and the Thuggy cult and their little cave of doom was freaking awesome. I love that. So they did go bigger, bolder, and a little more expensive with everything, including the CGI. But I like this one.
Yes, there's nothing to not like about this movie, other than the fact that it lacks a little bit on storytelling. They've
Yep.
got a step up in every way. Like we said, they knew that this was going to be a picture people were going to want to see. So everything that made the first movie fantastic needed to go up another notch, and they did do that. The sets, to your point, were much grander in scale. Even when it came to the Well of Souls, how big that set was.
Right.
Just even the sacrificial pit in this movie was even bigger than that, I think. The action sequences were bigger with like you said, the railway carts.
Oh, love that.
But I don't think it was until this last viewing that I actually even really knew what the children were digging for in the mines.
Oh, you
Uh,
never caught that before?
no, never. And it's like I know I've seen it at some point in my 20s and 30s, but just never caught that there were two more rocks that they were supposed to be looking for.
Yeah, they're digging for gems in general and the other two Sankara stones.
Okay. Yeah, that was a little news to me. So I was kind of like, okay, that's fun. Had to write that down because I didn't want to forget it ever again. Like, why are they digging?
Well, if you look at the skull, there was a spot for two more before they even mentioned that there was two more.
I did not notice that. I just saw the nose and the eyes.
Nose in the eyes, and then there was two jaw pieces on each side of the mouth.
Okay. I mean, and that the stones were really neat. Where I think it may have lost people was it's I don't want to say it's a religion that's not massively embraced in America, just maybe not as much at the time. So where you had Catholic mythology in the first and third movie, and even to a point in the fourth, here's this other movie that's an Eastern philosophy, and there was just more for an audience to soak up and learn. And I don't think that they really gave it the credit that it could have had for the Stones or even the Thuggy cult. Because it's I know Spielberg doesn't just make shit up. He pulls things out of history and he
Right.
just makes a neat story out of things.
Well, to that point, I love how they did the beginning with Lao Che in China, and it just flowed into India. So it felt like a nice progression. Like, oh, he didn't bounce back to America. He didn't go off over here for a minute, then come back down. It's not like he's traversing the world. Yes, he is traversing the world, but we see him basically in the span of like a couple of days go from China to, oh shit, my heart's trying to get ripped out.
Yeah, but if you notice that they're in the plane in China, they jump out in China and they land in the desert in in South Asia. So you're like, okay, well, I mean,
Well, we get a
whatever.
little whitewater rafting trip here. Okay. We've all been
That's
on those. They could be a little bumpy and you go further than you think you do.
I mean, it's funny. They stop and they land. Literally, they land falling from a plane in a big inflatable boat in the
Yeah.
snow and slide down the fucking the Alps or whatever it was. Not the Alps, obviously.
Himalayas or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and they survive, and then they land from that mountain into a jungle river.
Yeah.
That goes into the desert, and then they make it back somehow into India again. So it's like they traverse a lot of biospheres in that fall. And
Which is
that,
one of the most ridiculous things ever in Indiana Jones until we had a fridge scene.
yes, so it's like when people bitch about that, let's go back and look at this and see how silly that was.
You can point at each one of the movies and say there's one particular scene in there that's completely stupid, but in the context of fun, it's on a 10, it's a 10. But in the context of reality, it's a 0.
Well, you can't bitch about that sort of thing when it comes to a Spielberg movie. Like
Yeah,
Spielberg has certain staples in his movies. Indiana Jones has staples in the movies where it's like it's almost another character unto itself. The violence is always implied. You never actually see actual violence in these movies. The action is always nonstop. Go, 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 go. Like there's fight scenes that you're seeing amongst the characters, but the background is always fucking moving. Like you're on a train, you're on a cart,
right.
whatever the situation may be, a blimp. The music is always just as whimsical as the characters in itself, and the underdog is always the one that comes out on top. That's one of the neat things about the Indiana Jones movies, where this nerdy ass teacher can actually be a fucking action hero.
And he
And
definitely is.
yeah, and in this one, there's not a whole lot of romance. I mean, there's more than what's necessary. There was another story that they could have told there, and I think that's why Willie was a horrible character. That's for a moment and a half. Um, they had a lot more action in this, and it was pretty much nonstop from the moment that he drinks that poison to the very moment where he's getting splashed at the end with the fucking elephant. Like it's nonstop shit happening to him, and it's fun. It's nonstop fun.
Yeah. I
It
call
just
it a hell
doesn't
of a
make sense.
ride.
Yes, and that's why we actually have like, was it two or is it one or two Indiana Jones rides at this point? Like,
I want to say 2, but I'm
I think
not
it
sure.
might be two rides, and Lord knows how many stunt shows that they've had like in the past. Like, it's
Right.
just fun. It's always fun, and I think once you got to Crystal Skull, that's where like it wasn't fun anymore, and I don't know why. I think it was maybe they were insisting upon Shia LaBeouf, or just, I don't know. It just wasn't as fun, even as this. And this has always been, to me, the weakest of the trilogy. And now it stands up as a good movie again.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, this is definitely the weak one for a lot of people, but I don't know. I just don't see it that way. I could. It's definitely its own entity, sandwiched in between two Nazi-centric evil villain stories. So it kind of like does stick out. So in the grand context, it's the prequel. You can slam the other two together. I just, like I said earlier, I don't do that just because I like the breaking up of the story.
It does, like, it fits in with what Lucas and Spielberg wanted Indy to be, which was like a character from old radio serials. And this
Right.
is just like another adventure of that series. And it didn't really get like um canonical is not the word I'm looking for, but it didn't you didn't have that timeline, I think, until you got to part 3, where he's
Right.
like, where he's, oh god, I've got to face the Nazis again. That's where you kind of get that chronological issue, or not issue, but that moment there. This was just, this could have been any time. If they would have just not put a date down there, it wouldn't have mattered, because it just would have been another one of his adventures.
I think they should have just kept it a couple of years after Raiders, in my opinion. Like, you didn't really need to shoehorn it as a prequel. There was a go between, because if you now look at the full franchise, it's like 1 Nazi, 2 Thuggy, 3 Nazi, 4 Russian, 5 Nazi. Gee, I'm seeing a pattern here.
People like Nazis. Well, no, people like watching
yeah.
Nazis get blown up, thrown
And
off,
get their
cliffs,
ass kicked and blown,
faces melted.
Yep. You know, the crazy death scenes, and you know, we as a reference, our very own Hannibal is in Dial of Destiny. Mads Mikkelsen is the evil German in part 5. So that's another reason to look. I'm kind of looking forward to that one. He tends to try and pick good quality movies, and it's directed by James Mangold, so we got a different director. Oh, but to answer your question about part 4, I think what the misstep was with that one, and if we ever need to review that, hey, people, Patreon, you got to pay for us to do that one. But I think the problem with that one is they were just making a typical action movie instead of making an Indiana Jones film. That was the misstep, in my opinion. They were writing it for everybody wants another one. Let's just crank out an action movie. And there was like no QC control over it, like from Harrison Ford to Spielberg to Lucas. They all just were like, the story, sure. Aliens, sure. Just do it. So it just kind of felt like, let's just get it out there. But Harrison's took it very personally how poorly Crystal Skull came out, and hence the reason why this last one is happening is he really feels compelled to end the story on a better note than Crystal Skull, but we will see.
I mean, Crystal Skull ended on a pretty good note. There was Indian Miriam and credits. It ended. Like, that was the best part of the whole fucking movie, was those credits going, hey. But
well, and these credits ended with them getting swarmed by everybody that they had just saved and brought their kids back in a bright, vibrant village. And then credits.
On that note, so when it's like a war scene of the kids running up the hill, and the parents are running down the hill, and they like fucking collide into one another. Like, at what point, like, are people going, not mine, not mine, not mine, mine, no, yours? Like, there was like no control over knowing whose fucking kid was what behind the back there. And it just made me laugh. Like, it was so exciting and happy, but there was a lot of kids there. It's like, how do the parents know which ones are theirs?
Oh, they were all screaming names and whatnot, so it was pretty loud and crazy. And if it honestly happened in real life, that's probably how it would go down. You got 70 kids and like 140 parents, and everybody's screaming for names, grabbing for like, no, get away from me, get them. Oh, there, nope, whoops, nope, you.
Not
hey, you over here.
And see, it's like, I don't, how many Kevin Smiths are there west of the Mississippi? Like 73,000. We don't know that there's nothing like that, or names are like that. Like,
I think we need to look at the census. Last I noticed, it was 8,422,000.
And this was the only time in a movie, or in history, I think, in any story, where someone went, "Yay, British people! Imperialism! Hooray!"
As they swarmed from both sides and took over the Thuggies. They showed up at just the last minute, just like usual.
Like, it's one of those fun cases, like, where if the movie would have just been like 15 minutes total, if they would have just told the British in the first place. All they would have needed to tell the British was they're mining for gold. Oh, and they would have just fucking flooded that shit.
That's true. At least with like Temple of Doom, though, it doesn't have the Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of hole to it, where if you take Indiana Jones out, the Nazis still would have died at the end because their whole idea was to open the Ark of the Covenant. With this, if Indy didn't show up to help the Thuggies, they'd still be stuck in a mine and ruling the world.
Yes, yes.
Because nobody would have slowed them down and they would have gotten the other two Sankara stones at some point.
And I love the fucking arrogance of the wise man thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you can't get there from here. You got to go through this tunnel, get these kids, come back here, and then take a left turn. Then you go to Delhi. Like, it was one of the neat things about Indiana Jones. It's like he goes to some place for personal gain. Like he knows about the rocks, he knows the mythology about it, and he figures if there's any chance to finding it, it's going to make a name for himself and make the museum a ton of money.
Right.
And just like in every other Indiana Jones film, he sees a crisis that's global, far beyond himself, far beyond the museum, far beyond the antiquities. And then he's driven by moral obligation to do what's right. And that's always what makes Indy the hero. It's not all the crazy shit he gets into. It's the choices that he makes to do what's best for the world, but not getting the Holy Grail, giving up these stones or giving up the last one to the village so they could thrive again. It's what makes Indy the shiznit.
And he's an ass kicker. And he takes an ass kicking.
Speaking of which, and we said this movie ups things up by 2, they had the same bad motherfucker with the sword gimmick, but this time they gave Indy no gun.
Which was awesome. I laugh every time I watch this movie.
And then another one of the fucking signatures that it had was Christopher Ford's "oh my goodness" face as he runs away from like a crowd of God knows how many fucking thuggies that are after him. I don't know, but what I do love about this movie, I absolutely love. You mentioned it before, Mola Ram. He is probably the scariest indie villain, I think. Like the Gestapo was pretty cool, and he was creepy, like in weird beyond Nazi sort of ways. But Mola Ram is just fucking evil, like to his core. Like he worships a death god,
right?
And he wears dead things on his head. Like that's actually a fucking ram's head right there. And he's got a little face. And it's not a monkey. A little face with hair that goes not just above where his hand is, it goes all the way down Mola Ram's back. And when he's like interrogating Indy in this scene, he's sitting there petting his hat.
Oh, yeah.
Like
fucking, it's a baby kitty.
Yeah, like Donald Pleasance would fucking pet a cat giving it his exposition. And I was sitting there watching going, he's petting a fucking dead head. Yeah.
That's one of those subtle things that actors do sometimes that they didn't ask him to do, but they're like, hey, you want to actually do that when you're doing your dialogue? Sure.
Yeah, right. Or
he's probably just standing around checking out the mask, and they're like, hey, you might want to do that, because they were known for being spontaneous on all the indie sets for certain things. And I wouldn't put it past them that they saw him just kind of messing with the hat off to the side, and they're like, hey, pet that too.
Yeah, and honestly, from speaking of ad libs and whatnot, he shaved his head impromptu. He wasn't asked to, as far as I know, and it worked so well in this movie. He looked so scary that he became a famous villain in India from this day forward with a shaved head.
Oh, okay.
So I mean,
I did not know that.
Yeah, it definitely worked for him. His death was pretty glorious. They didn't show it unless you bought like the special edition, and even then, a lot of it was stock footage with the crocodiles and stuff like that.
Oh, and right. But before you finish off, I'm just going to say he doesn't show up till an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. So what does that tell you? That they saved him for the midpoint of the movie for you.
That's true. And the fucking funny thing about that is you're still having fun for the first hour and 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, you don't even realize it. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. How long are we into the movie? And now we're getting this bad motherfucker? Oh, damn. Because you're not really paying attention to the time. I just happened to look because I was curious, and I'm like, oh, wow, he doesn't show up till an hour and 5 minutes in. That's a mark of a good story, that you're not like sitting there, oh God, I'm bored. When are we going to get to the good stuff? No, the movie kept going.
Well, there were two bad guys before him that you would see.
Jay.
Yeah, the gentleman that was schooled abroad, and then the new Maharaja, which like you just really wanted to be like, oh, you're like a little childlike empress, aren't you, dude? Like you just wanted to squeeze his cheeks.
Maybe he like older women.
Older women. He's got a thing for Asian chicks. As do I. Watch our Clerks episode. Quit fucking hating on me for being racist. It was the other Kevin Smith. He wrote it. But no, he was fun. I liked him. I liked the Maharaja was a weird character. Like,
yeah,
I understand why they put him there, and that was to reinforce Short Round.
yes.
Because working this poor movie suffered so much shit with the MPAA because they knew that it was going to make a fuck ton of money, but the MPAA was nitpicking the shit out of them, probably for a little extra scratch, but trying to make it so that they wouldn't get a rated R rating. So, I mean, this was the first PG-13 movie, wasn't it?
Yep, this forced the creation of PG-13. And if I remember right, part of it had to do with having Indy say, oh shit.
Yes, I caught that too. I was like, hey, Indy said a dirty word. But the Maharaja is the one that as the slave drivers are whipping Indy, here's this little kid that's like, what, 10, 12 years old. You can't have an adult whipping a child. So here's a villainous child that's going to whip the hero child. And eventually Short Round gets so fucking pushed over the edge by this little prick that he full on brands the motherfucker. Yep. Like they don't show it, but you do hear it. He gets this hot torch or a poker and just jabs the fucker right in the stomach. I'm like,
Hannibal style. He wanted a little barbecue.
Kind of right. Like you were never gonna forget my fucking name. It's on your ass.
Short round. And now it's a short round on your ass, buddy. But you know, they also worked it around to where you had Short Round whipping some of the thuggy members at certain times, even though it had like no effect. Him hitting thuggies. His big action sequences was him nut-shotting everybody. He wasn't actually like kicking guys in the head and knocking them out. At least we didn't go that completely goofy. Yeah. And so Short Round, and kudos to the actor. I hope he wins an Oscar, Ki Hu Kwan, for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
If he doesn't, we riot.
He should win. We'll see. There's some really stiff competition this year, but just want to say that he had I liked him in this movie. I liked him in Goonies too. So I think he's just fine. I'm just glad he came back to acting, but at least as a kid, they had him treated just enough correctly that he can't take down an adult by just straight up brawn. He nut shots him like you should.
He does. And this behind me is like, if I can get out of the way there, that picture is really, to me, what this movie could have been and what it should have been. Like, you've got Willie in the background out of focus. And the more sincere scene, the more touching moment is Indy apologizing to Short Round for hurting him. Like, straight up, he feels bad that he hurt what's the closest thing that he's ever had to his son.
Right.
And so really, watching this again fresh as an adult makes me even angrier at part 4. We didn't need Shia LaBeouf. We didn't need Indiana Jones Jr. We already had Short Round.
Yeah, for some reason, somebody felt like we needed to get an Indiana Jones Jr. going on. And if anything, this movie set up was Indy was kind of mentoring this kid and was a bit of a fatherly figure to him, the one that he never really had in Last Crusade. Like, his dad took him on archaeological digs and everything, and so he got the same kind of desire to do that. But he didn't really get this from his dad as you watch Last Crusade, and this kind of ties into that. So, and if we had gotten a proper part 4, we didn't need a kid. If he was into acting at the time, we could have had that movie with him as more
Yeah.
grown up and taking over not necessarily the franchise, but he could take over his own little major plot in a movie instead of being a side character in a subplot.
Yeah. Fuck, you've got Creed. It's not Rocky. You've got Creed. That's successful still. Same
Yeah.
universe. It works.
I mean, I'd love to see him in Dial of Destiny, but it doesn't sound like that happened.
It would be great.
Be cool. Or
But
hey, if you want to do spin-offs like TV shows or whatever, hey, this guy's going to be in demand. You might want to get him on a limited run series. Just saying.
yeah, right. Come on, Paramount Plus. We're looking at you.
6 episodes. You could just do a quick little, you could just call it Short Round in the Temple of Kick-Ass. That's a horrible name. Don't do that.
No. But see, I liked the way that they wrote the dynamic between Indy and Short Round. It was like the dynamic between Henry Jones and Indy. Because Henry Jones, like you said, he took him out on all these archaeological digs, but it wasn't to teach Indy. It was because he had to.
His wife
died.
Yeah.
I believe, I don't remember what she died from, but I believe she'd passed or had left, one of the two. But Indy grew up with his dad treating him like another adult.
Right.
And you see Indy treating Short Round that way, like they're playing poker, and he's teaching Short Round how to cheat.
Well, and he's seeing that Short Round is cheating and pulls the card out of his sleeve. Then they get into an argument, and then that just reminds me of Willie and the whole jungle scene, and she's running around screaming while they're having this conversation going on. I was just dying laughing. I don't know. A lot of this I find comical, but I know, like, for any other movie, I would be incredibly annoyed by some of this shit. But for some reason, it just works for me in this movie. I even wrote down Willie is like the best whitey bitch character I have ever seen in a movie that just doesn't stop screaming or whining about anything.
Bless her heart. Like, her husband put her through the worst fucking shit. Like, not even Karen Black went through the shit that she had to go through. Like, she was really in a pit of 2,000 fucking cockroaches and millipedes and shit. And they had to give her like mass amounts of sedatives to even be in there with the bugs.
I couldn't hack that.
No, I don't like bugs at all. I like sedatives a lot, but not enough.
I know.
Not enough to go down. I can get my own sedatives without bugs. That's really what it comes down to. They put her through a lot of shit. She did a little bit more extra stunt work, I think, than maybe Karen Black did in the first movie. Not so much the fourth one. They made her do a lot more, I think. But
I think she wanted to do more in the fourth one.
I think so too, because Miriam was not a damsel in distress at any given point in time.
No.
If she was very like,
she did it on purpose.
Yeah, I was irritable about it. Like, she meant to get captured by Bullock. It was her way of getting it to escape. She was going to fucking get him schlitzed and, go away. But anyway, Willie's not that great. They did have a line for her in Crystal Skull where someone was going to ask whatever happened to her, and he says, I heard she went off and married some big director. And for whatever reason, they thought to cut it out. And I'm like, why? That was probably the smartest line in the goddamn movie.
He even says in all of these movies, he makes it clear he's been with quite a few women over his years. This is nothing new. He's a little James Bondish when it comes to that. So what's wrong with doing that? It's like these throwaway lines that they're like, oh, well, this would connect to this and this would connect to that. We don't need that in here. Nobody cares. Yet when we hear about these and we're like legit fans of the franchise, we want it to be good. We very much care. You take that out and we wonder, what the fuck were you doing? Like, what are you doing? You throw that, you keep that in there, it's not a pleasing the fandom thing. It makes a little more consistency going on. Yeah, I know. Movies and consistency are like, we could analyze today's the inconsistencies between all the movies within themselves and then amongst the whole franchise as an entirety. But little dialogue snippets. It takes literally 2 seconds to say that. And then, hey, that's a nice touch. That's a nice Easter egg.
Yes. And it does go beyond fan service. It makes things whole. It ties things together. Way off topic. The Prophecy trilogy, the original trilogy, is like that. Like all three movies only have Christopher Walken together or in common, but there's at one point in the last film that strings everything together, and it's like, wow, for a long payoff, that was really smart. And it wasn't fan service. There wasn't such a thing at the time. It was just good, smart writing when they know that they didn't have a whole lot of budget. This, they had plenty of fucking budget. All four of these movies have had plenty of fucking budget.
And the fifth one now too.
Oh, I'm sure, because I mean they've got young Indy meeting old Indy, and it's probably going to look fucking flawless. We could only hope it's going to look flawless. But I don't know. Anti-aging software has come pretty far in the last few years.
Yeah, as long as we're not getting Tron Legacy style, I'll be okay.
I still haven't brought myself to see that. I haven't.
I have it. I've watched it. It's all right, but man, the de-aging CGI in that is not that great.
It looked like rubber Terminator.
But like you said, it's improved over the years. So, and from what we've seen in trailers, it looks very good. So I'm relatively excited, but I'm keeping my expectations in check. But Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, definitely one of my favorites.
Like, hopefully, the Fountain of Youth. He's already drank that, so I mean, I don't know. Surprise us, goddammit, but please make it good.
Yeah, just don't have robotic sentient organisms from the 40th century coming here. We don't need that.
No.
I'd take Malaram's like unborn seventh child to come alive and take vengeance upon everybody.
You know what? The cult aspect was actually really cool. I did really like that. They spun it well too. Like, where he's saying no one's lived in the castle for years. They're saying, oh no,
60 years, yeah.
Yeah, you're starting to see lights on in the castle, and there's a new Maharaja. And it's almost like a ghost story that they're spinning there for you at the beginning. And that in itself was kind of smart. Because again, this was more of a fun movie than it was a smart movie. And that's fine. That's
they still
fine.
Properly paced things out. So it wasn't like they didn't have a good flow to the story, but like the detail work could have been a little bit better.
Oh, sure. I think the slowest part of the whole movie was the little cat and mouse scene between Indy and Willie, whether or not they're going to shack up.
Although that turned into a pretty nice fight scene and then revealing of the passageway in the other room as he puts the hands on the stone chest and Willie's like, I'm standing right here. And then he shoves the door and she squeeches or screeches.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go play that video game tonight when we're done. For people at home watching, I'm a Lego game addict, so sorry. If there's a Lego game series of it, I'll play it. And Indiana Jones is a great series. So
I have a couple Indiana Jones games, but they're PS2 games.
See, that's the thing. There's not a whole lot of like really great accessible Indiana Jones games. So for this company to come out and make something that's engaging for adults and kids, like, hooray. It was before they used any of the voices in the games, so you don't really get so much of that. But I mean, the feel is there of it. Like, it starts off with a little Lego Alfred Molina and a Lego Indy. There's no complaints.
I need to play that then.
Yeah, it's totally cool. And it's free on PS Now, whatever it's called now. I don't know.
Yeah, PlayStation. Yeah. Well, it's PlayStation Plus, and that's all part of the same package, but
yeah, they need to put more of the Lucas games on there, like the Indiana Jones games. Maniac Mansion was on there for a little while. You can't get that anymore. Yeah. So,
well, we got Lucasfilm to thank for doing whatever they're doing with the games nowadays.
I don't know whatever happened to that. They got sold, 10 years ago or so, maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure what the IP is for that, because I think now you could put out a game and it'd probably be pretty exciting to play.
I would think so. Like, as long as the story was good, it can't get worse than part 4. Like,
The
it just
TV
can't.
show was better.
The TV show was better. Young Indiana Jones Chronicles was much better than that.
And that was at times not the greatest TV show either. And that was
No,
canceled. That is a possibility for our podcast. So if you're interested, put a comment below. We might consider that.
it was a product of its time.
Yep.
It wasn't River Phoenix, but it was still pretty good.
Yeah. I remember liking it.
I watched it. It was on around the same time as Briscoe, wasn't it?
Something like that. It was definitely mid early 90s.
Yeah, sometime around there.
I want to say 93, but that's just off the top of my head. I could be wrong.
I don't know. We'll
94.
later look.
Yeah, well, look.
It's not like we don't have all the world's fucking information before our hands.
Yes, we're gonna go on our phones. But also just to let everybody know the wonderful 4Ks that are out there and beautiful steel books have the original motion picture movie poster artwork on them. You can still get them from Amazon for really good prices, and they're stunning.
1994 through 1996.
Ah, it was close.
Why?
Was
That's
that
a
2
long
seasons
time
then?
for the. I think so, but that's long into the extreme era of the 90s. Wow, I would have thought like 91, 90.
Yeah.
Wow, it was not extreme, so maybe that's why it didn't last very long.
Indiana XXX Extreme. And not the parody of that.
Well, now I have something to go look for.
maybe not. You might not like what you find.
Right. Oh, that's a rabbit hole. That's a rabbit hole. Get out of
All right, so maybe we should get out of that, and maybe we should wrap up our convo. I got one last question for you though before we wrap it up. Did you catch a particular Ghostbuster cameo in this?
Yes, Dr. Stantz, shifty bastard that he is, chartered Indy an escape plane owned by the guy that he was trying to run from. Again, did not bring that notebook. I can't remember the guy's last name, but the guy that he was trying to get the diamond from at the beginning of the movie, that's who owned the plane. And so that's why the pilots were there. And it was Dan Aykroyd was the British chap talking to him, selling or chartering the plane for him.
Yep, that was booking agent is what I kind of called him.
Yeah,
I kind of missed his name too, and I forgot to look it up after the movie was over because I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember he's in this one, and if you blink, you miss it.
Yes, because they don't show his face at all.
Kind of, but it's at a distance, and he's got a mustache going, and he's not nearly as big as he is now.
No, and
this is in between.
He looked almost the way he did in Exit to Eden.
Yeah.
Which I don't care what anybody says. He's funny in that movie. But people are
he's
like,
a funny guy in general.
Yeah. So it's like I say that, and people are also like, don't you also like Nothing But Trouble?
I like Nothing But Trouble. We know other people that like Nothing But Trouble. It's a fun fucking movie. I don't know what to tell you.
Dude, it's got fucking Digital Underground in there. God bless.
Right? Big clock and all.
Big clock, penis on Aykroyd's nose, dancing with the fucking Humpty Crew. It's a dope ass flick.
Like, come on.
John Candy strip
Chevy
dancing
Chase.
to Big Girls Don't Cry. That was.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, Indiana Jones takes place back in 1938. Not yeah, we'll get away from that. We're sorry.
I am, he's not. All right, Kevin, what you got to do for this score on Indiana Jones Temple of Doom?
Temple of Doom, I'm gonna go 4 out of 5. It's fun, a lot of fun, more than it probably should be. I'd put it at the number 3 part 3 rank out of the top 4. It's still going to be that little redheaded stepchild, but it's still loved.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go 4.5 on this. It's Raiders is my favorite by a country mile. It's not even close. And I go in order. It's 1, 2, and 3 for me for the top 3 of the franchise. And it's just such a fun movie. It's so isolated in its own universe that I really don't mind it. And the things that bother most people actually don't for me in this movie. And that's fine too. But hey, you like it, you don't like it. You are very much entitled to your opinion. This is just what we're thinking of this. And hey, it's a fun time. Grab some popcorn. At least with part 4, you couldn't just do that. You couldn't just shut your brain off because it kept making you go, what am I doing here? What am I watching? And that is our public service announcement from the Suns and Shadows cast and 0 Point Reviews. If you like our video, please hit that like button below. Comment. We'd like to hear any thoughts you have about Temple of Doom. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification, and that way you can stay tuned with all of our video content that we have coming up. And we're pleased to announce we have launched our Patreon. So stay tuned in the next few seconds. We're going to scroll our members in that link. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Make sure you check us out on all of our social media platforms. We got Facebook, Twitter. We are at Suns and Shadows. We're also on Instagram at Suns and Shadows Cast. We are at SunsAndShadows.com. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you down the road.